recording. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here with us today. My name is Kenneth Mejia. I am our Los Angeles City Controller. I'm the city's accountant, auditor, and paymaster. And so we also oversee the city's general city budget, which is a little over $13 billion. And also with me today are Rick and Maria, but I will let them introduce themselves. So Rick, you have to unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Rick Cole, Chief Deputy Controller with the Controller's Office since last December.
Maria.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maria Rosas. I'm the Deputy Controller of Finance for the Controller's Office.
Perfect. Well, thank you to everyone again for being here. Me, Rick, and Maria, we're from our executive team. We handle a lot of the, I'd say the financial side as well from the executive office in partnership with our civil service teams. So we decided to do this presentation for you all because we wanted to sort of demystify the budget process. We wanted you all, especially the public, to understand how it works. I know that sometimes the city will show a calendar of how the budget process works, or when the best time is for the public to give public input at a certain month or a certain time. But from being here in office, being through one budget cycle, you sort of learn more about where there are actually maybe a better time to get public input into the budget. And so we're here to explain how the budget works, the timeline, some reforms we think would be better for the city as it comes to our finances and everything. And so that's the reason why we did this. So this is meant to educate the public. So for all those experts out there on the budget, I know that many of you from the Budget Advocates are here. You might be listening to this and be like, I already know this, but this is for the people who you know want to learn more about the beginning of the budget process. And also we want to inform you where the best place to plug in. So before I start, like I said, if you have any questions, if you want to say hello, feel free to send me a message in the chat. I see everything. Hey, Teresa, good to see you here. And thank you to all the neighborhood councils here. So we're going to start this off and we're going to pass it off to Maria.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to start off with the very quick overview of the budget. So the current fiscal year budget is a little over $13.1 billion. You can utilize the link on this slide and it will direct you to our budget dashboard. This dashboard has the adopted budget numbers, but is concentrated on providing visuals by department allocation. You can see the information through several years as well as through a bar or pie chart. The full budget can be found on the Controller's website. And let me share my screen.
Let me stop. I think I have to stop sharing mine and then you can share yours. All right, go ahead.
So I'm just gonna share my screen. Can you guys see this? I'm on the Controller's website. So on the Controller's website, if you go over to budgets, you'll be able to go into the corresponding budget, adopted budget. So right now we're currently in 2023/2024. Interestingly enough, though, these are not the only documents related to our budget. If you go over to the City Administrative Officer website, under Budget and Financial Information, you'll be able to see a lot of other documents pertaining to our budget. This includes the budget summary, the proposed budget, Blue Book, White Book, and a lot of other additional information that is actually very helpful. Now, I know not everyone is a numbers or a budgets person, and all these different documents can make it that much more confusing. I understand, I've been there, but what I found helpful is understanding where most of the key things are, as well as understanding how they relate to one another. So we won't go through them all because that in itself could be a whole different presentation, but I will touch on a few key items. So the mayor's proposed budget is the initial draft of the budget. It is a version submitted to council for review and approval. The blue book is the supplemental detail for the proposed budget. The adopted budget is the final budget approved by council, and the detail for this can be found in the white book. The supplemental information actually provides a lot of insight into department spending and programs. Now, you don't need to go through the entire book. You can simply do a quick Control F to help you find what you may be looking for. If you're just looking to see how the budget is spread through the department, there's a few key exhibits that are very helpful. So I'm just going to show you one that I find the most helpful, which is Exhibit G, which is part of the adopted budget, as you'll see, 2023-2024. Exhibit G will show you each department, how the amount per allocation, so pension, HR, the total cost of operation, and in the bottom you'll see it corresponds to the same 13.1 billion. That is the adopted budget. In this same book, we have other helpful exhibits like Exhibit D, which helps us look at the unrestricted and the restricted revenues. So the unrestricted revenues can be used for any general expenditure, while restricted revenues are restricted for specific use like sewer revenue, gas tax, and grants. So you'll see the 13.1 billion and how much of it is restricted and unrestricted. So if you find something that is of interest to you in any of these exhibits, you can then dig deeper into the white book and see if you can find any more information that will be helpful for you. Now, I do want to spend a little bit of time on looking into the adopted budget. So I already have some of these pulled up. So this is the adopted budget, and this is an example of a department. So have the department name on the top, and it'll be split up into expenditures and appropriations and sources of funds. You'll notice that both of these tie out. They're the same number, right? And side by side, we'll have the comparison of the mayor's proposed budget and the adopted budget. This can be very helpful if you wanted to take a look and to see what changed between the time that the mayor proposed the budget and when the council actually approved it. And if we look into the white book, so the white book has a little bit more detail by department. It has detail on programs. It has more detailed on, you'll see a quick 5-year budget history. And it also provides a little bit more insight onto fiscal year over year comparison. So if I look at the same department, this is the pretty much cover letter for the department. And if I go into it further, we'll see the same expenditures and appropriations, sources of funds. But as you'll notice, it'll compare it to the adopted budget for the previous fiscal year. And if I look into it further, it'll give me more information about the program and the changes that occurred within the program. So that's a little bit of an overview of those key items. And now that we know a little bit more about those documents, we can dive into the timeline. So let's take a look at the budget timeline. Now, it may seem that the budget process starts around April when the public comments are held. However, it actually begins mid-late August. So for instance, August 2023 was the kickoff for fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. The budget prep is kicked off by a letter from the mayor, which emphasizes the office's priorities. Usually at the same time, the CAO sends the budget preparation instruction memo. This gives the departments a guideline of how to structure and present their budget. The departments start preparing their budgets in September and finalize in October. During this time, the mayor's office and the CAO may meet with certain departments to discuss priorities and proposals. The budget submissions are due to the mayor, CAO, and CLA in November. Once submitted, the CAO does its analysis and recommendations around December through January. If there are any questions or additional comments, the departments have a chance to provide the CAO with clarification and additional supporting information as needed. Between February through March, the mayor's office works on the proposed budget. This includes the draft of the Blue Book, analysis of the Blue Book. The mayor also holds office hearings, which is an opportunity for each department to make its case for particular items. After this, the Blue Book is finalized. At the same time, the Controller's Office is working on the revenue estimate, which is due March 1st, and this is a revenue estimate for the next fiscal year. By April 20th, the mayor's proposed budget is submitted to council. Once received, the budget committee sends instructions to all departments and preparation for budget and finance hearings commence. At this time is when each department has their hearing and is given a chance to defend their budget. This is usually what's televised to the public. The committee may ask for report backs or additional analysis if they need more clarification. This is also the time when the floor is open for public comments. Once all hearings are completed and all additional questions have been answered, the council submits their changes and revisions to the mayor's budget. Council has until June 1st to adopt the budget. Once approved by council, it goes back to the mayor. The mayor has to approve or veto the changes approximately between June 2nd and 8th. Then around June 9th through 15th, council would consider the mayor's vetoes and either sustain or override with a 2/3 majority vote. After all approve, the budget becomes the adopted budget. I'll hand it back over to you, Kenneth or Rick.
Thank you, Maria. Let's go to our Chief Deputy Controller, Rick, to talk about the base budget.
So Maria has just laid out a lengthy 9-month process. In fact, almost immediately after the adoption of the budget in late May or early June by the City Council, the new fiscal year starts on July 1st. The city doesn't operate on a calendar year, it operates on a fiscal year. And so right after the new changes are programmed in for July 1st, people start thinking about their next budget. So it takes almost the whole year for that long timeline. The irony is that almost nothing changes despite months and months of work. The changes are important to individual communities, individual programs, individual staff members, to people who care deeply about whether their local recreation center gets a refurbishment or a new roof. But in the big aggregate of a $13 billion budget and a multi-billion-dollar general fund budget, the changes that happen within the budget are pretty well predetermined. And the reality is that you basically start with what's called a base budget, which is the money you got last year for all the positions that you were authorized, all the work that you were planning to do. And in recent years, that has become really cemented in so that the mayor will tell, both the previous mayor and the current mayor will tell the departments, work within your base budget. You're really going to have to work hard to justify anything over and above your base budget. Now, the base budget goes up every year. Why does it go up every year automatically? Well, of course, there's inflation, but the biggest driver is staff salaries. Why is that? Because staff salaries make up 70% of the general fund budget. So if folks are due a raise, then you have to pay that raise. That means that the budget goes up. Not only does the salaries go up, but so do the pensions go up. And so that's not allocated to individual departments, but there's an automatic growth. So it's kind of like budgeting on automatic pilot. And what that means is decisions made years ago, sometimes even decades ago, are sort of frozen into the budget. We decided This is how much we're going to allocate to the police department. This is how much we're going to allocate to the fire department. This is how much we're going to allocate to the zoo and the library. And they basically live with that budget plus the level of inflation. And that means that among all of the many departments, there's very little change between them. Now, new departments obviously don't have a base budget, and there have been quite a number of new departments added in the last 10 years. But they usually start extremely small, unless they're a part of a big reorganization. And so they're what people in the know at City Hall call budget dust. That means kind of a rounding error, right? In a budget of $13 billion, $35 million is not a lot of money out of $13.2 billion. So the small departments have grown and been established, but the big departments are sort of on automatic pilot. Maria's described the process. The departments have already gotten their letter from the mayor, a little bit late this year, but not significantly. And basically her instructions were, and this is not unusual, given that we're going to have a tough budget year next year, and I'll explain in a minute why. She basically said, anything new you want, take it out of what you're already doing. Now, there's a certain logic to that, right? Because everybody should be sharpening their pencils, looking for efficiencies, looking for things that are no longer needed or no longer quite as important. But of course, the new stuff has a disadvantage because the old stuff has people who are doing those jobs. And so if you're not going to do that job anymore and there's a job attached to that, unless that person is going to do the new thing, they're going to say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to lose my job. And in fact, they aren't going to lose their job because of union and civil service rules. So it actually becomes fairly difficult to weed out old programs or old ways of doing business and move into a new era to meet changing community needs. And needs change not only because the world changes and technology changes and the politics of the city change, but also there are built-in inequities in our city. There are neighborhoods that have always had better services and neighborhoods that have always had worse services. And so when you lock in sort of the status quo of here's your budget and you have to work within that existing budget, and if you want to add anything, you've got to subtract something. That means that basically the status quo has the built-in advantage. So all of these meetings in which a lot of people will carry big books with lots of numbers and go through and say, you know, we need to add this position. Well, no, we don't have enough money. What are you going to take away? Well, we can't really take away anything. All that goes back and forth for months before the mayor puts her final touch and she puts her final approval on the book that goes to the city council. Then the city council, as Maria's explained, has these marathon meetings. They go on for basically a week and a half, day after day, hours and hours. Every single department is grilled about their spending priorities by the 5 members of the finance committee. And sometimes as many as 50 or 100 or 150 people will come out and testify. Sometimes one particular program will bring out everybody in their orange shirts or their blue shirts or their green shirts to make sure that their program isn't cut or their program gets funded. But at the end of the day, in last year, out of the huge budget, the city budget committee made changes of $22 million net, right? That sounds like a lot. And for the programs that were beneficiaries of the budget committee's largesse, that meant a tremendous amount. One of the family services centers that was left off of getting funded got funded as a result of a whole bunch of people coming down and pounding on the rostrum and saying we need this program. But $22 million out of $13 billion, again, is what the insiders at City Hall call budget dust. So it's a lot of effort, but really almost nothing in the big picture. Billions of dollars are just locked in and not changed at all. It's actually more than 99% of the budget proposed by the mayor is what's ultimately ratified by the city council. And the vast majority of that is just a mirror of the previous year's budget, up or down a little bit. So let's go to the next slide. If this is the process that we're kind of inheriting, in which the decisions made years and even decades ago are kind of locked in, and yet the city has changed dramatically over those years and decades, how can we make the budget more a reflection of the needs and priorities of the city, and give the public and the elected officials some real authority, and also hold them accountable for the decisions that get made? One big reform would be to simply do this every other year, because if only $22 million is going to change, to go through 9 months worth of effort and all of that hard work out in the public and all of the people coming down, not that much changes in 2 years. So let's save half of that time, and there could be some changes made throughout the year, because as the chair of the finance committee, Paul Krikorian before and Bob Blumenfield now, always says, when the budget is done, it's not done. It can be changed by the city council throughout the year, and they do make changes throughout the year. So it wouldn't be locked into concrete, but it would just basically carry forward, which is what we will do anyway. It's also important, capital is what we spend not on salaries or gasoline or new maintenance of existing facilities. Capital is when we invest in building new things or buying new things. And you would think a city, the second largest city in the country, with a huge 465 square mile territory, we would have a tremendously sophisticated program for investing in our infrastructure, but we don't. In fact, the capital budget is really an afterthought. And until recent years, we didn't even really have a capital budget, and we still don't have a real capital budget. We have a wish list of everything that departments and individual elected officials have said we should spend money on it. The vast majority of it is unfunded or underfunded. That's why our sidewalks look like they do. That's why our streets look like they do. That's why there are streets where there's no lighting. That's why there are things like parks that desperately need makeovers, and places where there are no parks, because we don't have a robust capital program where we're allocating those resources. So what the Comptroller's Office has consistently been recommending is that we not go to zero-based budgeting, which was a fad some years ago, the idea that you could just start from scratch, right? Like if you had nothing, if you had no government at all, what would you spend your money on? That's a great intellectual exercise, but we have a government, we have parks, we have libraries. We can't just sweep them aside and start over again from scratch. But what we can do, particularly over a period of years, is re-examine, did the things we inherited from our parents and our grandparents, are those really the right allocation of our resources in the 21st century, in 23 and 25 and 2030, with the level of homelessness, with the impacts of climate change, with a move from a car-centric transportation system to trying to have a more balanced system with a better success around public transit and bikes and walking. Those kind of changes really aren't reflected in our base budget, which again we've inherited from before. So an exercise that really brings the public in, not at the end of the process when the budget is essentially already cooked, but rather at the beginning, to talk about what the recipe is. What are the ingredients that should go into the budget? What are the results we're trying to achieve? If we're trying to achieve a reduction of homelessness, or we're trying to achieve a greater sense of safety and security in our neighborhoods, what's the best way of achieving that? And it may not be what we've been doing for the last 5 years or the last 10 years. It may be some imaginative, innovative thinking. And that would be worth all of those marathon hearings. That would be worth all of that work that goes into the budget. Ultimately, at the end of the day, a budget is not just a collection of numbers. A budget is really a statement of values. It says these are the things that we want to invest in: the people, the facilities, the priorities. These are the things that we, as a community of 4 million people, have decided are our most important priorities. And these are the things we want to achieve with the tax money that we provide to the government. And that kind of debate has not taken place in a long time in our city. And one way to begin that debate, because again, as Maria pointed out, these budget documents are very intimidating. Lots of zeros, lots of numbers, lots of pages, and it's easy for people who are very skilled in the vocabulary of government, very skilled in the budget lingo, very sophisticated in terms of knowing the numbers. They have an automatic tremendous advantage of the City Hall insiders versus the average person who just knows that their trees aren't getting trimmed or they feel unsafe in their neighborhood. So participatory budgeting is a way of beginning to introduce people to understand the budgeting process in a way that isn't as intimidating, to take a portion of the budget and actually go through a process where neighbors can have a discussion, begin to formulate ideas about what they'd like to spend money on, and then ultimately vote on those things. We're not talking about having 4 million people debate how we spend $4 billion from scratch, but we are talking about a pilot program. I think it's about $10 million in participatory budgeting that's broken out into a number of different areas of the city that have been underserved over the years. And it's a way of introducing people to the idea that they have agency, that they have power. Another piece of participatory budgeting is the neighborhood council budget advocates, in which the neighborhood councils are producing people who begin to understand the complexities of the budget, and because of that knowledge are able to have more impact on the process. But with the existing budget process, without that opportunity for debate at the beginning of the process about where we're going versus at the end of the process trying to fine tune where we're getting to, the city is really shortchanging itself on both balancing the budget, living within our means, and adapting to a changing city and a changing future. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Kenneth.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Maria, for that. And pretty much what we want to get people more and more acquainted to is public input, right? I think this is going to be where you all come in. One of the questions that was asked to us during this meeting was, well, what are some tips for us to have a better input into the changes? Because as Rick said, most of this is already pretty much baked in, and we do all these meetings. We have a budget and finance committee that does weeks of meetings, but only a net tens of millions actually changes from the mayor's proposal to what council changes. And so for us, we're trying to figure out, well, where can we have more of a say in our process? So in net, when the budget's mayor got released in April of this year, when it finally got approved and implemented in June, only 80 million changed out of a $13.1 billion budget. And as Rick said, to City Hall insiders, it's budget dust. It's immaterial, it's small. And so some suggestions that we have and recommendations for budget advocates and for the general public, if you want to get something funded in your community or You want there to be more of an impact, because once it becomes April, a lot of these council members and elected officials will be bombarded by requests. So the best place to start is early, is right now. One of the key takeaways from the timeline that Maria shared is that departments are already going through their budget process, and they have to submit their budget requests by mid-November. And so we say engage, first of all, with your elected officials, especially those on the budget and finance committee. You can find that online, and I'll share the website for all the meetings that they have. But we shouldn't have to wait until April, April 20th and beyond, or May, which is when the budget's already sort of set, right? Try to engage with your council members now so that they can, when they have committee meetings, they can talk to departments, and the departments can already figure out what they're going to request in their proposal to the mayor. And so the next thing too, besides reaching out to your elected officials, is to reach out to department leaders, the GMs, those at the commission meetings, commissioners. Those are actually a very great, commission meetings and committee meetings are a great way to get involved at a more intimate level with those who are elected officials, and also who lead the departments and the operations. And so that can be a great place. Usually, sometimes people only think about the general city council meetings, but at these commission and committee meetings, they're much smaller. And that gives you the opportunity to make your voice heard even more. So definitely take advantage of those. And I will leave some links here so that you all can figure out where to go. But here, the first link I'm going to post is all the council meetings and committee meeting agendas and information, just so you all can be aware of where all that is. So if you go to that link in the chat, that can tell you what's coming up. You can see what agendas are there, who are the members. The next thing I'm going to share is the website where you could find where all the commission meetings are. And you can find out who are the commission members, their emails, their contact info. And lastly, what I'm going to share too is a place where you can find contact information on where to contact your elected officials. And one thing I want to say is it's important to contact your elected officials, but just know that there are staffers and there are people in the council offices who actually handle the budget, or they handle policy or legislation. And pretty much those are people who help the council member, because the council member and the mayor and other elected officials, they are obviously being bombarded in their public email by a lot of requests and emails. So reaching out to those who are in charge of the budget or policy or legislative direction is also another great way to reach out and get your voices heard. Because even for myself, and I'm assuming for other elected officials, a lot of the work we rely on is our staff. So where you can do that is you can go to this website, city contact page, and I'll put it here on in the chat. But it's the cityphone.lacity.org, and here you could see all the department leaders for all the departments. You can go to the council offices and see which council districts are where, and you could see who are the staffers. And usually, our emails are set up where it's your first name dot last name at lacity.org, and that's where a great way to get your voice heard already. So I'll put email format. Usually it's first name, last name at lacity.org. There you go. Glenn Bailey suggests subscribing to the city council committee agendas of interest via the city's early notification system. So that's also a great way too, if you just want to subscribe to the council agendas. That way you're aware of what's happening. that's also a great way to get involved. So I would say the time to do it is now. Don't just wait until April. I'll tell you the truth. Before I took office, I thought April was the way to go. And because that's what publicly City Hall would show is like, oh, you have an opportunity to make your voices heard in April. But then I realized being here through a budget process and being in office, a lot of the budget is already baked way before then. And like I said, it happens now. And so if you're thinking about um, getting in touch with your council members, do it now. If you're thinking about making an impact on the departments, because the departments have to submit their proposed department budget by next month, then do it right now. Do it by October, by November. Get your voices heard and really show up to those meetings. Because by the time, like I said, it's April or May, it's already pretty much set. And the net change from the proposal to the adopted is very tiny that its budget does. So that's what that's pretty much what we wanted to do for tonight's meeting, is to give you all more of an input and give you our experience from being within City Hall and seeing it from the inside and sort of demystify what you all see publicly. And so for the next 18 minutes, feel free to ask questions, or if you have any comments, you could just leave it in the chat. You could send it to me or to Jane, and we'll rack it up. The department budgets are actually due on the November 17th. And so that's when I think you all, you have less than 3 weeks. But if anyone else if you have questions, the way we'll do this is feel free to leave it in the chat and we will answer it. And so we're going to start with questions that we got in over the beginning of this presentation. And this starts with Jack's question, Jack Humphreyville. And Maria or Rick, if you guys have anything, if you want to chime in or answer, or if we don't know the answer, we can always get back to you all. We have everyone's email here. But the first question is what is the impact on the general fund budget of the recent court decision tossing out the challenge to measure ULA? Even with the infusion of funds, the general fund for 2024-25 may still be in the red. So this was a question by Jack Humphreyville. Rick or Maria, if you guys have any answer on what impact the recent Measure ULA toss out will have on the general fund, on our budget, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, it's as Eric Severide used to say on CBS News, too soon to tell. The city was prudent in not spending the total estimated, or not budgeting, not allocating the total that ULA was expected to bring in because of that concern. And of course, the legal machinations will go on for a while before a final decision is ultimately rendered. But they did make, off the top of my head, I'm not sure what the allocation was. I think it was, I probably could find it out even before we finish, but it was significantly less than the total they expected. And it was for specific things that may have to be scaled back, or the city will need to dip into other sources of revenue. As you know, Jack, and as probably many on the call know, the budget is precariously balanced. We have the highest level of reserves that the city's ever had, at least numerically, not necessarily as a percentage. But we don't want to dip into our reserves because we're actually in a growing economy, not a shrinking one. And we've all been through a couple of really hard hits, 2008, 2009, and then COVID, and furloughs and layoffs and service cutbacks. That's what the reserve is to protect us against, not to fill in for when the politics or the legal things change. So the budget is already going to be under strain from the recently signed and approved contract for police rank and file. That will be matched undoubtedly by the police management, who will get a similar raise, And of course, the civilian unions, whose contracts are also all up January 1st, they are thinking, well, if the police got as much as they got, we're entitled to the same amount. And the city's not reached agreement with them, but when it does, that will also hit the budget. So there are a lot of strains on the budget, and the ULA question mark is just one of those, and it makes next year's budget, as I alluded to earlier on, really challenging, and meaning that new programs are going to get a lot of skepticism. And again, the problem is that new programs sometimes are the best programs, but we seem to be stuck with some of the old ones.
Perfect. Thank you, Rick. And 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 this recent fiscal year that just ended on June 30th, and we're going to be publicizing even more. But as it ended on June 30th, our general funds did well compared to the prior year before. And as Rick said, we are cognizant and of our reserves, and the way we ended June 30th was actually higher than expected. And so definitely, I think this measure ULA, the money that we'll bring in, would have a pretty big impact. And like Rick said, I know the city was very prudent on spending anything of those funds because of the lawsuit. I just put in the chat from Glenn Bailey, as just to let you all know, if you want to get more involved in neighborhood councils, because that's another way to get your voice heard, is the neighborhood council budget advocates have started meeting with the 40 plus city departments, and they welcome public participation. So email labudgetadvocates@gmail.com and visit budgetadvocates.org. All right, the next question we have, let me see. Next question we have is from Esteban Bar. Does the police section include the sheriff, or does that come from a different budget? So the police budget, the LAPD is the city of LA, and the sheriff's department is the county. So the sheriff won't be included in the city budget. All right. The next question or comment we have a comment from Peggy that says, Rick Cole is awesome. All right, Rick, you are awesome. Just want to let you know. The next question we have is from Carla, is can we get a copy of these slides? So yes, if you're on here, we can send a copy of the slides to all the people who joined this. Obviously, a lot of what we talked about is in the substance, not really on the slides, but we have a recording of this, which will be on YouTube, so you can watch it, you could speed it up, you can rewind it, whatever you need. All right, the next question is from Jack Humperville. How is the vacancy factor factored into the budget? For example, a department has 100 positions times salary and benefits, but if only there are 90 employees, how is that difference of 10 handled? Rick, I think you want to touch on this?
Yeah, it's one of those, again, budget insiders understand this, but the general public is not really privy to it. In the past, positions would sometimes be frozen, so the positions could not be filled. Generally speaking, positions that are now vacant, of which it's about 15% overall, and our office released a study on both how that shakes out department by department, and some of the reasons why, and some of the things we can do to fix it. But we've got about 15%, so it's out of 100 people, 15 would typically be not getting paid. So those are savings. Those are big savings, and those actually help balance the budget in this current year, because some of the money that was saved last year rolled over into this year. But even though all the positions are technically funded, that is, you could fill all those positions within the budget technically, there's also a factor that's sort of arbitrarily tacked on. I forget the word that's used now. They've changed the word just, I think, to keep people guessing. But for example, we had in the controller's office, just an arbitrary number that said out of our total budget for all of the positions that are authorized, which is about 153, and we don't have all of those filled, that there was a certain dollar number that we could not spend on salaries. So any one of those positions could have been filled. But if we had filled them all, we would have exceeded our budget. So they give us, if again, using your simplistic analogy, which I think is helpful to understand, 100 people all making $100,000. I think that's $10 million. So if the $10 million is our salaries, we could spend $10 million, except there's also a line item that says we can't spend $1 million of that $10 million. So that's how the vacancy factor is priced into the budget. And that's realistic, right? The chance of any of the departments filling every single position because of our very cumbersome civil service system is very low. So it's reasonable to factor in a vacancy factor, but it means that the budget isn't really balanced in the sense that if every position was filled, we would go over budget.
You're Rick, and like he said, you know, those positions that are vacant, they come off as salary savings, and if all the increases that we're doing, especially with the MOUs that are getting renegotiated, if we filled up every position, we would be definitely be over. And you know, we list out, and when you all see in our preliminary financial report, which we'll be publicizing very soon, we touch on that point on how we have savings because of that. But all right, let's go to
I'm going to
the
amend
next
slightly.
question.
I'll amend just slightly my first answer to Jack Humphreyville. I had not seen, which he has an eagle eye, that the judge had dismissed the lawsuit challenging ULA, I guess yesterday or the day before. So the impact of that should be positive in the sense that now those ULA funds should flow, assuming that the appeal is not, there's not an appeal and that appeal is not successful and all of that. But again, I think the city should be prudent on that, particularly because there was a very big fall off in revenue as people avoided selling their property to hopefully skip that tax. Whether that all comes back with high interest rates in terms of sales of property, that's probably going to change the original estimates of how much is due to come in on ULA. Too soon to tell.
Perfect. And just for everyone to know, we actually have a data website that tracks the fund balance of every fund in the city of LA, and that also includes ULA. It includes a column that shows what we budgeted to make from ULA or any other fund and how much the current fund balance is. So at, you know, to Rick's point, the thing that we saw so far is it's we don't see the large trickling in as we thought we would have with the passing of ULA. And so, you know, as part of our transparency and financial transparency, we list those funds balances in real time so that you all are aware of where we're standing. And so I will actually put that in the chat just so you all are aware. And maybe in the future, we will do another Zoom where we actually teach you how to use all the websites that we have, because that's in itself is a whole another ball game of education, but it'll really help you all, especially when you make your request and pleadings to the departments and to your elected officials. All right, next question is, I think we answered this one, but it is from where you go over any tips for budget advocates trying to benefit from this process. Yeah, like I said, I think one of the best tips is get involved right now. If you could get in touch with your commissioners, with your departments, with your elected officials, especially not just their elected officials' main email, but the staffers who handle the budget will be overseeing it and will be in the council members' ears. That process is right now is to reach out with them, request to meet with them. I think I think timing is my biggest recommendation for people, is to do things now and not wait until people tell you you have May to make your voices heard. Nah, like you have to do it now. Matt has a question. Who should I talk to for capital funding? Rick, do you have anything about capital?
So Jessica Meany and Investing in Place is a great advocacy group who's developed a pretty sophisticated understanding of the need for reform in capital budgeting and the real world implications to what we see on our streets and right in our neighborhoods. The mayor has appointed a very bright deputy mayor, Randall Winston, whose job it is to get his arms around the city's infrastructure and capital. He's another great person to talk with. And interestingly, the mayor's new budget person, Bernice Hollins, was working on the capital budget. In fact, the capital budget is in as good a shape as it is because of her efforts over the last couple of years. It's come a long way from just being an obscure list of wish lists and projects. So there's some key people. Jessica, Winston, Bernice are focused in on the capital challenges for the city, and would be good resources for you to reach out to.
And just to touch on capital project and capital spending, and this will be released too in our preliminary financial report, but you know, the fiscal year ending June 30th, we actually underspent on our capital project spending than to what was budgeted by $316 million. Yeah, 316 million. So you could just see from there, you know, that's money not spent. That I think, you know, Matt, your question is about who could you talk to about this funding? Well, that's 316 million that was budgeted to be spent, but it wasn't touched. And I think we emphasize in the report that it's great that we're saving money, but that means that comes at a cost. That means we're not spending, right? And that's why we need to have more accountability and timeliness when it comes to the budget process and to our spending process, because you're just going to wait another year and then we find out that, oh, we haven't spent another 400 million, another 500 million. So definitely those people that Rick said are great contacts to have. The next question is from Sarah. What's the best way to engage with a department general manager? Email, office visit, call? You know, I think when it comes to a GM, email, for sure. I think email is a great way. I don't know if they're in their office or their phone numbers are the default, you know, office phone numbers that just go to a general voicemail, but email definitely. And the other best way to engage with a GM is to show up to those commission and committee meetings, because those are smaller meetings, they're more intimate, and you can actually make your voice be heard even more. And so I would advise or recommend that you go to that, besides emailing, but also joining those department meetings, those committee commission meetings. Also emailing their staff who help them. In the city phone website that I listed, you can see who are some of those people below them that are doing the work, and those are great ways to also get involved. The next question is from Sky. Has your office looked into how much the city spends in every neighborhood on city services such as crosswalk maintenance, trash pickup, street cleaning? She said, they say, I live in a predominantly Black community and have lived in a predominantly white community here, and the streets look very different. So the question is, you know, has the city or our office ever done an analysis on how the city spends money in different neighborhoods? You know, that's one of the big things that our office would actually is trying to do. Part of our budget. And on the payroll side, it's really hard to track when people enter in their time, you know, did I Did I do work in District 1 or District 2? So, we are still trying to come up with a way for better cost accounting, especially on a geographic level. I know when it comes to actual payment to city vendors for goods or services, those are actually can be a lot easier to find out where that money is being spent. And so we are definitely um, trying to work on that and getting whatever is spent on vendors, because sometimes they do list what neighborhoods they're getting involved with. Another thing we're trying to do too is show more transparency on discretionary fundings for council districts. And we also have a website on spending by neighborhood councils. So I think the neighborhood council spending, and when we show where the discretionary funding is being made by council offices, you will be able to see uh, on a more detailed level than you are now as to what's being spent. It won't be everything because the way the accounting works here, but it will give sort of um, a pretty good spotlight on what money's being spent. I don't know, Rick or Maria, if you've seen anything where we're able to break down spending by a district or by neighborhood as easy as we can make it.
There is talk of creating a greater spotlight on an analysis of what's called equity of are the resources being allocated in a fair way. Of course, it's so challenging, right? As Kenneth has just outlined, to account for everything, and it's also challenging because everybody's definition of equity is different. Folks in more affluent neighborhoods say, well, we pay way more taxes, so of course we should get enhanced services. And folks in more disadvantaged neighborhoods say, well, look, our needs are so much greater. We should get a higher proportion. Folks in the middle say, well, let's cut it all up equally, right? So everybody gets their fair share. And of course, that's the tradition in Los Angeles, is in theory, dividing everything up by 15, in which every council member gets their own share. But the analysis we've been doing of council discretionary funds finds that even in the funds that individual council members have jurisdiction over, there's dramatic disparity between what some council members have in the way of discretionary funds and what other council members have, which of course affects the neighborhoods that they serve.
Maria, I don't know if you want to chime in, or if you've seen anything where on FMS or in our accounting software systems that show district level spending, but it could be pretty difficult, right? In terms of our accounting.
Yeah, it can be pretty challenging, especially because as we've seen in the checkbook, which is what is open for the public, not everything is outlined there. But we are working, I think, internally to see if there's something that could be created.
Perfect. I know we are over by 5 minutes, but we will keep going. Rick or Maria, are you guys good for a couple more questions? These will be our last questions here. So whoever asks, we'll get through it. So 4 more questions left. Kathleen asked, during city council meetings, when they have paid lobbyists advocating for a cause, does their message value more than a regular person's input? That's a good. Rick, you want to say something?
The lobbyists don't give 3-minute speeches. The lobbyists take Kenneth's advice, which is they know the people who are making decisions. They've had coffee with them. They know their phone numbers, their emails. They sidle up to them at breaks and whisper in their ear. That doesn't mean that they necessarily get their way, but they do have a much different pathway to making their influence heard. Very rarely will they get up and give a talk because they know that that's not the most effective way. Again, Kenneth pointed to the staff members. Again, knowing the right staff member and having a relationship with them, and you don't have to be a lobbyist to develop those relationships. You can develop some relationships with your council member, budget deputy, or chief of staff, so that during the break you can go and talk to them.
Yeah, and like Rick said, lobbyists most of the time are not at these meetings, council meetings or public meetings. They're doing a lot of their talking behind the scenes, and that's why it's more important that you get yourself, your family, your neighbors, your your kids even to get involved and really reach out to the elected officials and their staffers. All right, next question is what is the oversight on departments with the budgets a department can ask for? Uh, Let me think if I think I'm reading this question right. It's me. So what is the oversight on departments that budget can ask for versus how much we know as taxpayers how that money is being used? So I think the question is, what is the oversight on these departments' budgets and making sure it's being used in the right way? Because that's where we come in, and obviously you all come in. As the city controller's office, we provide a lot of transparency, websites, reports. We provide audits, performance audits, and financial. But you know, that's why we really are trying to show what policies and what departments and elected officials are doing when we release any of the data pages we release. Or and so I think for us, unfortunately, because we are a small office, we don't have all the auditors in the world. We have about 7 performance auditors, and we have 40 plus departments. So it's very difficult for us to try and make sure that every department is spending effectively and efficiently within their budget, right? And so, for us, the way we've been able to do it in the controller's office is we use members in our executive team who are actually people who are attorneys, who are controllers, who are accountants, who are former, officials in City Hall, to actually do the work of accountability and oversight. So, you all could always send us emails just in requests if you feel like there's something going on or want us to look into. Just know that we get a lot of requests, but we are trying to definitely do our best to make sure the budgets are spending. Um, my computer is going to die in about 5 minutes, so I'll ask these last 2 questions because we're already at 8:08 p.m. Um, this question is from Esteban. Savings is subjective in respect to what is delivered to the citizens. What in respect to what is delivered to the citizens in regards to services to the community. Savings is subjective in respect to what is delivered to the citizens in regards to services to the community. I think that's yeah. I mean, Rick, do you want to say anything or?
It sounds more like a statement than a question, and
Right,
probably we would all agree with it.
right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, a department could be within budget, and save a lot of money. So financially, it looks well, but if a department was just sitting around on their fingers and doing nothing and still being under budget, then those savings weren't used in the effective manner, which goes back to the previous question as to making sure that that money is being used correctly. Someone asked, what's the best way to engage with LA budget advocates? Sarah asked, and we put that in the chat earlier, but the budget advocates are neighborhood council members, and you can email them at labudgetadvocates@gmail.com, or you could visit budgetadvocates.org. And so these people are actually meeting with the 40 plus department heads, so you all can get in touch. Enough for one more question. How would the budget be affected if the number of council members is increased to 25 members? Rick or Maria, you want to take a stab or?
So there would be, 10 more salaries, and that's not insignificant. They make about $185,000 a year, so that's 1.8
No,
million.
council members make 230.
Okay, I'm behind. So that's 2.3 million. But again, in a $13 billion budget, you can blink and miss it. And so that's not a big cost. Now, if the 25 members had as big a staff as the 15 members, that would also have a fairly significant cost. One would assume that instead of having as many members on the staff for such huge districts, that the number of staff would be reduced per council member. So it's real money, but it's real money that is insignificant in the bigger picture of a city with a $13 billion budget.
Perfect. And all right, so we are at 8:11 and my battery's about to die, but I just want to thank everyone here for joining us to talk about the budget. We will be sending out the slides to those, and we'll also send you all the recording of this, so you all could watch it again and use this to your advantage for your communities, for your neighborhood councils, and to engage with those in power in City Hall. So I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to Rick. Thank you to Maria. Thank you to our sign language interpreters, Scott and Donna. Thank you to our closed captionist, Idris. Really appreciate that. Thank you to Jane, our chief of staff, for handling the PowerPoint and the organizing of this. But everyone, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Thank you, everyone.